Hi friends, welcome back to the channel. It's time to do our monthly wrap up, and today we're going to be talking about the 7 books that I read in June. Overall, I think June was a good, albeit a little bit weird month. Even though I read a lot, it didn't really translate into a huge number of books because one of the books that I read was super duper long. Additionally, that book put me in like the biggest book hangover, so my reading pace was quite slow in the first half of the month, but I feel like I found my groove and things got more back to normal in the second half of the month. For the genre breakdown, out of the 7 books that I read, 4 were romance and 3 were fantasy. All 7 books that I read were on my TBR. So I was able to complete 7 out of the 8 books set on my June TBR. My ratings this month were, I would say, a little bit mediocre. My average rating was a 3.3, and in total I read 3,322 pages. So with those stats out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about our first book. This first book is such a huge accomplishment for me. I do just kind of need to take an internal round of applause. Can confirm this is the longest book I've ever read, and that would be Kingdom of Ash by Sarah J. Maas. What makes this even better is that this is the final book in the Throne of Glass series, which is an 8-book fantasy series. I have been trying to tackle that series for about the past 7 months, and I am now happy to say that I have finally completed it. This book is just the conclusion of all conclusions, because by the end of this series, we're following so many different character storylines. We had so much to wrap up in this book. So this is 980 pages. She is a brick. It did take so long to get through, and dare I say maybe it took a little bit too long. I ended up giving this a 4 stars. I do think this book was amazing. It was a masterpiece. All the little Easter eggs and character plot lines that come together by the end of this is truly immaculate. Even though this book has so many positives, it did leave me feeling quite drained and exhausted. And because of that, I was really happy for the series to be over with. If you want to watch me read any of the books within the series, I did do 2 different reading vlogs for Throne of Glass, but all that I'm saying now, you can see and feel in my reading experience getting through this one. I truly don't know how anyone could ever do a reread of the series. I just found this to be so emotionally taxing. We go through so much, so many highs and lows with our characters, that I just wanted them to have a happy ending for it to be over with. Overall, I would recommend this series. This is such a strong fantasy series for someone who loves the genre. However, I will say, be mindful of your mental health whenever you get to the later half of these books. Some of these things got quite dark, and I swear put me into a pretty severe depressive episode at certain points. So be kind to yourself if you're interested in this series. This definitely isn't for the weak. This definitely isn't a beginner series to start with. I think overall I do like ACOTAR just a little bit more. I think it's much more approachable. I do think I'm more of a romantic-y girly at heart, so I do love how that leans more into the romance. While we get quite a few relationships built throughout this series, the focus very much is on the fantasy and of the political intrigue. I feel like I've been talking for a while, so I'm gonna stop myself there. If you want to see more, go check out those reading vlogs. This should be a fun one to talk about. The next book I read was Summer Fridays by Suzanne Rindell. It's been a while. It's been a while since I've had a 1-star read. It's been a while since I just completely hate read a book, but there's no time like the present. This book was so terrible to me, and I truly would not recommend it to anyone. I had to double check when this book was written because it did feel like a book that was written in the early 2000s because it was so problematic, and yet it was actually written in 2024, and I don't know how this would have ever been approved to get published. To give you guys just a quick overview of the plot, because I don't want to stay on this one for too long. The whole plot summary is our FMC is getting cheated on by her fiance. He's cheating on her with a woman from work who is also in a relationship. At the company Christmas party, all 4 of those people are sitting at the same table having dinner. The 2 work colleagues who are cheating on their partners go off to have a cigarette, and our FMC Sawyer meets our MMC Nick. They both kind of know and are aware that they're being cheated on by their respective partners. So when they end up reconnecting in the summertime, I guess there's a thing that happens in New York in the summertime on Fridays where basically everyone like works a half day. So Sawyer and Nick start spending their summer Fridays together, exploring the city, hanging out, going on dates, and eventually developing a relationship while they're still with their respective partners. Does anyone see any red flags with what I'm describing here? This book couldn't have glorified and romanticized cheating any more than it absolutely did. It was sickening to me. Sickening how I was supposed to buy into Sawyer and Nick's relationship while Sawyer was still engaged. And just to compound all that I'm already saying, what made it even worse is Nick is so rude to Sawyer for like the first 4 times they ever speak to each other. Super misogynistic, super condescending, and just flat out rude. How am I supposed to root for a character who's already a doormat, willingly accepting that she's getting cheated on by her long-term partner? She's then gonna make the decision to cheat on said partner with a man that's mean to her. Like, what part of this book is romantic? Because I truly couldn't find anywhere that I was buying into the romance. If you take anything from this video, please, please, for me, please don't pick up this book. I'll be the first to tell you that seeing this book through until the end was not worth it. Moving on to better and happier topics. The next book I read was Caught Up by Liz Tomforde. This is book 3 in the Windy City series, which follows different sports romances with different athletes throughout the city of Chicago. In book 3, we're following an MLB player named Kai. He's the star pitcher on Chicago's baseball team and the father to a 1.5-year-old named Max. Mom is totally out of the picture. Their relationship was kind of just like a very casual one-night stand dynamic. He didn't even know that Max existed until he was 6 months old and being dropped off by him. And since then, the mom has just completely been out of the picture, and Kai has just been rotating through nannies and can't really find dependable help, which is a huge problem because baseball season has started and he can't be there to watch his kid 24/7. So in comes our FMC Miller. She is actually the coach's daughter. She's a world-renowned, award-winning pastry chef, but she's having a really hard time with her inspiration right now and ends up going to spend time with her dad for the summer. After running into Kai, she ends up taking the nannying position and watching over Max. I have liked the other books within the series. Book 1 I gave a 4 stars, book 2 I gave a 3.5, and we stayed on with that same trajectory with book 3 I gave a 3.5. I would say a main critique throughout the whole series and still continuing on within this book is I just feel like these books are a little bit too long. The main conflict that we see within this book, I think we had the same conversation regarding about 18 times. And it really boils down to that Miller and Kai don't make sense together. Their personal needs and wants for a relationship simply do not match. All Kai needs right now for him and his son is stability. Miller has a severe avoidant attachment style, refuses to settle down, refuses to put down roots anywhere. And yet, because these two have a physical attraction to each other, they keep trying to make that work, even though those needs are inherently opposite of each other. I found the repetition of this conflict and these conversations, specifically from Miller's point of view, really frustrating because even though she would acknowledge that, hey, we do not work together, we would not work in a relationship or in something more, she would incessantly make sexual innuendos and be very sex forward in their conversations, which led to a lot of confusion and lust by Kai. And I just felt like this book was unnecessarily horny. Instead of Miller being in like her mid-20s, sometimes I felt like her characterization was of a 15-year-old teenage boy. Now, with all of that being said, I did actually enjoy the ending. I felt like it was quite strong because I loved seeing the relationship being built between Miller and Max, the son. Their bond was so sweet and really just did get me in my feels. I feel like with all of what I've said, it's a bit surprising that I did rate it as highly as I did, but I really would attribute it to the ending and that family unit dynamic being built up. I just don't think that this relationship dynamic worked for me in the beginning. It isn't my favorite in the series, and I don't really think that these characters are ones that are going to stick with me. Next, I read Assistant to the Villain by Nicole Maehrer. I had a lot of high hopes for this one. Not only does my mom love this book, but whenever I added this book to my TBR, a lot of you hopped in on the comments and said that you also loved this book. I did know that this is a very silly, goofy, fantastical romance. This definitely isn't a book that you should ever go into wanting to see a interesting fantasy world, complex magic system. Absolutely not the case when going into this one. The magic and fantasy aspects literally aren't even described and explained ever within this book. This really is just more of a fantastical rom-com between Evie, our FMC, and the town's villain, Tristan. After a mishap in the woods with the town's villain, Evie finds herself working for him, and these two could not be any more different. Evie is Miss Sunshine. She is the perpetual optimist. She has rose-colored glasses on at all times, and then you contrast that with the town's villain, whose main personality trait is being evil. But the banter and conversations between these two just lead to some very funny interactions. And after a while, these two start to develop feelings for one another. I do want to do a quick plug. I do feel like the humor within this book is very similar to The Wisteria Society of Lady Scoundrels by India Holton. This also is described as a fantastical rom-com with just a lot of absurd humor. And if I had to compare this to anything, I would definitely say Assistant to the Villain. I ended up giving this a 3 stars because while it was fun, while it was goofy, it did just make zero emotional impact on me. I didn't feel connected to our characters whatsoever. I didn't really buy into the relationship. The plot felt weak, and therefore this was really more of just a palate cleanser book for me rather than a series that I think I'm going to continue on with. Next, I read a book that has been on my physical TBR for so long, and that is Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. I had really been delaying this one because I'm pretty 50-50 on Abby Jimenez. I didn't know if I was going to love this. I was quite skeptical when entering into this one, but I'm happy to say that I actually ended up loving this. This is book 3 in an interconnected contemporary romance series. I would heavily recommend that you read the first 2 before this. Book 1 is part of your world. Book 2 is yours truly. Characters throughout those first 2 books definitely do play a key role within this one, and you'll definitely miss some of the nuances going on within here if you don't read those first 2 books. Within Just for the Summer, we follow Emma and Justin. These two meet on Reddit and realize that they actually share the same curse. The curse is that after they break up with someone, that person goes on to find the love of their life. These two kind of scheme up that since they share the same curse, if they were to date each other and break up, in theory, they would both go on to meet the love of their lives next. The premise of this has a fun setup, but be aware, this is so emotional. Really big trigger warning for child neglect and unhealthy parent dynamics within this one. Also completely unintentionally, but I feel like we had very similar relationship dynamics within this one that we had in Caught Up, and that our FMC has huge commitment issues, never wants to put down roots, and our MMC is in desperate need of stability, generally because children are involved. Because the relationship dynamics were so similar between this one and Caught Up, it was a very easy comparison to see which one I liked more. Caught Up gave a 3.5 stars. This I actually ended up giving a 4.5 stars. And no one is more shocked to say that than I am. I have actually yet to rate an Abby Jimenez book that highly before. So this one very much took me by surprise. I wasn't bought in the first half. I was quite wary of where this was going and how she was handling the traumas that we do see our characters enduring. But I really did enjoy how the trauma was handled at the end of the book, and our FMC taking accountability for what she has to do personally before she's able to be in a healthy relationship. So because of how that conversation was handled, I really did respect our character recognizing where she needs to be before she can be in a healthy relationship. And for that, the rating just kept increasing the more I went through this book. I would 100% recommend this. The vibes of this book do scream summer. Just keep in mind, this isn't just a fluffy, lighthearted read. There is a lot of emotional depth to this one. Moving on to our next physical read, I read You with a View by Jessica Joyce. I was really excited to get to this one because I have already read Jessica's other contemporary romance called The X-Files, and I gave that a 5 stars. That is the best book I've read so far in 2025. So I had a lot of high hopes going into this one. You with a View is her debut into contemporary romance, and I will say that I felt that throughout the story. The plot, the characters, the relationship dynamic was there, but there was just something missing. We would have fun, bantery conversations, but everything just felt a little bit off. Maybe a little bit unpolished is the word I could also use for it. When I would say that in The X-Files, every single word is perfect. Truly, I wouldn't change a word within that whole book. And I just felt that there was something lacking within this one. Something lacking within that perfecting touch that moves it into that 4-5 star realm. I feel like I have talked about this book a ton, so I'm just going to give the briefest of plot synopses. While grieving the loss of her grandmother, Noelle is desperate to locate her grandmother's long-lost love. With a few photos and a letter, she posts these on TikTok in hopes to find him. When she gets a response from his grandson, she would have never thought that it would actually be her high school nemesis, Theo. To learn more about their grandparents' love stories, the three of them actually decide to go on a road trip inspired by their grandparents' broken engagement. And throughout that time together, Noelle and Theo start to develop feelings. With giving it a 3.5, I did enjoy the relationship of these two. As mentioned, Theo is her high school nemesis, they're high school rivals. They just have a very competitive relationship by nature, and that leads to a lot of fun banter between these two. But again, something was just missing. Something from their interactions, their banter, just felt a little bit flat for me. I enjoyed this, I thought it was cute, I would recommend it, but it wasn't something that blew me away. And finally, the last book that I read in June was The Atlas 6 by Olivie Blake. I just finished this yesterday, so I didn't write any notes about it, but now I'm kind of regretting that decision because I don't even know how I would describe this book. I would say that this is more of a fantastical dark academia novel if I had to describe it as anything. Because our setting still takes place in the real world, it just does also exist in the real world that some people can do magic. Out of those people that can do magic, every 10 years, 6 of the best magicians are initiated into this secret society. So we get each recruit's POV throughout their first year in this initiation period of the secret society. Again, I had a lot of high hopes going into this one. I have read Olivie Blake before. I read One for My Enemy last year and gave it a 5 stars. She has very flowery, lush, somewhat pretentious writing, but I really liked it in that story. I do have to say, I don't think I liked it as much within the Atlas 6. I gave this a 3.5 stars because, one, it was a little bit hard to get to grips with each character's POV, and we end up getting 3 females' perspectives and 3 males. And with our females' perspectives, I felt like they were pretty distinctive and they were easy to separate in my mind. Something about the boys, I could really only remember one of them, and then 2 of the boys just kept getting confused in my mind, and I kept just continually kind of losing the plot of why they're doing certain things, why they're scheming certain ways, what alliances they're building. To compound a little bit of that confusion, there are just a lot of musings, I would say, in this book. There were just a lot of times where I could tell that Olivie Blake thought she was writing something very profound, and they didn't always hit sometimes. They did just kind of feel like musings of thought, musings of life that I don't really feel like we're adding to our plot. When I purchased this book, I didn't really realize what I was stumbling upon with the rest of the series. This is a trilogy, and I don't know what she wrote in book 3, but it has one of the lowest ratings I've ever personally seen on Goodreads. I also did see the plot twist that happened at the end of this book coming from a mile away. So because of all of those reasons and the fact that I don't think the series gets better with time, I don't really know if I'm going to continue this from here. If someone has read the series, feel free to let me know what you think. Is it worth it to continue? Because if I'm just being cutthroat with it, I don't really know if I have the time or patience to get through series that I'm not fully obsessed with. So that is the end of my June wrap up. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'd love to hear from you guys down below. Please feel free to hop in the comments. Maybe tell me the best book that you've read in June. Or if you're feeling a little feisty, maybe tell me the worst book that you read in June. But this is where I will love you and leave you. So thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe before you leave so that you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. And I hope to see you in the next one. Bye guys.